I painted Fulgrim. And this monument of a miniature really had much potential and complexity to it. After I built this towering snake boy, I drilled some places for magnets into the backside of his face. This really is a sentence no one would have said 100 years ago. Anyway, I started painting this guy with a large makeup sponge because I want this paint job to be recreatable by everyone, and since not everyone has an airbrush, I choose this way. So we moisten up the sponge and dip it into the paint, painting the wings with Corvus black. We mix a bit of dark purple in there, covering more or less 80% of the wing to have this from black to purple fading effect. I like to use makeup sponges because they are very fine poured. Is this even the right way to explain it? Anyway, you know what I mean. And now we change to a smaller sponge. Carefully mix a bit of magenta in there for the areas where the flight skins are attached to the fingers and the arms of the wing. These sponges really help us to create a smooth transition, and that's why we can add some light flash into it relatively carefree and just spread it all over the upper parts of the wing. We leave the rest of the wing dark purple for now, but place a highlight with a sponge at the end of the flight skin. We start painting the parts where his legs are fused into the serpent-like tail with the same mixture as before, as we just want a really smooth undertone for the skin here. If you like content like this, I would love to encourage you to leave a like or a subscription, as this really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. And a quick shout out to all those who are so engaging. Thank you guys so much. And now we put the sponges away and finally use some brushes. I started again with Corvus black and dark purple, placing them into the shadowy areas of the tail. Also, here's a very good example on how to wet blend. I put a big splotch of light flash onto the raised area and then create a transition between this and the dark purple I placed there before. In general, you could say I aim for having the brightest points more towards the front and the darker ones near towards the armor or at the sides. I added Bugmans glow into the mix to make the overall color look more alive, and even if it's a snake-like tail, it should look a bit warmer and organic in my opinion. So I wet blended Bugmans glow into the front area and followed its shapes with my brush strokes. Brush strokes. This is a really hard word to say for me. I played around with some of these colors and added more light and Elfic flash on top of it, again following the shapes of the mini. I painted the rest of the snake tail with small lines in quick succession, aiming upwards. I also covered the flight skin that is coming out of his power pack with the same color. These areas don't need to be highlighted as bright as the top ones. Having a bit of light and dark areas really makes the brighter ones pop more. And I also cleaned up the wings a bit, making them brighter with light and Elfic flesh. I added the same mixture to the most raised areas of his front, and after I was happy with it, I painted his Hellraiser-like parts and the open tissue with Bugmans glow. I also added a bit of dark purple in there, since I want this to look different and stand out. We are starting to have a transition between the scales and the skinny parts by this point. To brighten them up, we are using cold gray, which we are carefully placing onto the higher points. Just make sure you have a similar looking color in the end, so it looks coherent. I went on with his tail, placing small lines facing downwards this time. Painting the fingers of the wing arm with the mix of Corvus black and cold grey. Since the Hellraiser-like area was dry until this point, I decided to finish it, putting on some lines of light flash onto the most raised areas. And also on the open parts on his wings. Why are they even there? Is there any reason just for the sake of being? Maybe he can descend faster with these holes in his wings. Who knows? So if you have any idea or insights into aeronautics, please enlighten us. Since the serpent-like tail should be dry by this point, we are going to paint some more straight lines onto it, using the same color mixture to tie everything together. We are painting the claws of the wings with a mix of dark rust, Parasite brown, also wet blending some Elfic flesh onto the most raised edges. We are also painting the horns in the same way, but this time we are adding some horizontal lines onto them. Since they are near his beautiful face and the focus point of the mini, we give them a bit more attention. I had the idea of a white armor, but I wasn't sure if this would really fit the mini, so I asked you guys over on Instagram about it, and since you were also pretty keen on it, I had no other choice but to deliver here. So I gave his entire armor a coat of cold grey. I would recommend not being as intelligent as me and gluing it all together. I am usually not a big practitioner of sub-assemblies, but in this case, having the wings and the head as a separate part really makes sense. And I guess is even more joy to paint, because this mini has some really tricky to reach areas. So don't do as I, have him sub-assembled. Can you imagine building an armor for this guy? How do you feel as a warpsmith? Sir, do you want your tail to be covered as well? I guess I once again questioned too much about the 40k universe. But first, painting a test marine really fast to see if this color scheme actually works. As I said in a former video, I guess it was the Nurgle one, I go into these tutorials completely blind sometimes. After I was finished with his armor, I painted all the gold bits and trims and trinkets and whatsoever a Chaos Space Marine is carrying with him. And while you see me painting, I would like to make you aware of my Patreon and also give a shout out to those who already are and to those who are following me there and visiting my page. If you by any chance are also interested in being a part of this still small community and get access to the Discord server, you can find the link there. I want this to be something like a safe space where people can post, chat and talk about their progress, paintings, improvements and whatsoever, and not having to do so into the World Wide Web where there can be scary people but on a community server, since I understand sharing your passion and work can be scary sometimes. For the next step, we are painting his swords and the joints of the armor with dark silver. And now we are coming to the most defining step of this paint job. As we lay the base for this dirty verdigris style armor and make his overall appearance kind of dirty and dark. Playing with the idea of beautiful and depraved. At least this was the idea I had for this paint job. I wanted it to be a bit grimdark but not too grim, because I actually like to paint with bright colors. So we place a watered down jade into all the recesses of the golden parts. We try to water it down into a shade-like consistency, but it is not a real problem if the consistency of this color varies a bit, as this just sells the effect. And for the next step we are shading the gold with Vallejo's Game Wash Black. And don't forget to shake this one, as it can create a glossy effect if not done so. There are some few parts on this mini I really could not define. It looks like some kind of fabric or leather, and that's why I gave them a coat of Abaddon Black. A paint I don't really use that frequently, but in this case it's the perfect match because it creates an effect that somehow represents leather. I played around with the idea of giving him a leg or latex-like look here, but the dark leather is good as well. And it's ultimately not a really important part of the mini, and still I talk extremely much about it going into the next shot, which is highlighting the grey armor very hard with wolf grey. Because I somehow really like the grey armor up until this point, I'll try to leave it a bit greyish towards the shadowy areas, which will hopefully make the highlights pop even more in the end. I figured that the armor panels on his thighs are fairly critical for this effect, and that's why we take most of our time giving them smooth highlights, as we want to have a nice reflective effect here, making them look like metal but still not too much attention grabbing. So we place the brush strokes horizontally to create this non-metallic metal-like effect. For the rest of the armor we are just brightening up the armor panels with a mix of wolf grey and a pure white on the most raised parts. I don't know if this is specific me, but there was a time in my painting journey where I really struggled with painting whites. And even though I really do like it look-wise, especially with a golden trim, I always had trouble with it. Yeah, it turns out it was the paint itself. I always painted like Games Workshop suggested it, and in my humble opinion, Corex White is really not a good paint. I would use Wolf Grey 1,000 times over since I knew it, And sorry for the rant, but this had to be said. Once again, some of these parts are really tricky to reach, so I recommend doing sub-assemblies. I have to say, I sometimes struggled where Fulgrim ended and his armor or whatever started. If this is a good or a bad thing, I guess that's for everybody themselves to decide, but I ultimately think that it really shows the fusion of him, his armor, and the warp or whatsoever, which is quite fitting in my opinion. I dry brushed the scales on his back with the mix of Corvus black and Elfic flesh. The cape as well gets a coat of Corvus black, but I highlighted with wolf grey. I am sorry for some of this footage is not as focused as it should be. It seems miniatures this big create a distraction for the autofocus. I shall turn it off the next time. Since I wasn't sure with all the base colors up until this point, I paint the skin between the spikes in the same way we paint the rest of his skin. Dark purple, wet blended into Bugmans glow, wet blended into Elfic flesh. What do you even call these? I looked it up, but I did not found something in a reasonable time. I recall seeing this on a reptile-like animal, but I cannot remember which one. And now we are coming to his beautiful hair, and I don't want it to be white as well. That's why I choose the next fitting and worthy for a Prince of Access like hair tone, a bright blonde. I used Zandri dust with a hint of Parasite brown to create a base layer always following along the length of his hair. When the hair is dry, we shade it with Skeleton Horde contrast to give it a dark foundation. Just make sure you don't have any coffee stain like splotches on there and that it looks very clean. Because we are going to highlight it with a mix of Parasite brown and Elfic flesh. And while you see me painting, I'll ask you a question that I normally would ask my Patreons. I have some flawless blades laying around here, which will be given away at some point in the future. But here's the question. How should I paint these? I thought about the flawless blades in the style of the flawless host. Would that be something? Or should I better paint them in a style matching this Fulgrim? But I guess that would be some kind of boring, seeing the same colors once again. But anyway, I would be open for your suggestions. I highlighted the spikes of his tail with cold grey and used the same paint mixed with a bit of white for the edges of the coat. Even though I said it, I forgot to paint the trinkets on his tail. We revisit the verdigris style armor, brightening up the green once again with Jade. Having this darkened down layer of Jade and the one we are placing now really creates such a deep and rich looking verdigris style green. I could look at this for days, to be honest. It tickles something deep in my soul. I don't know what it is, I just love green tones. And we highlight the gold with light bronze. But this time we apply it with a consistency close to dry brushing. We don't need to be that neat here since the light dry brush sells the effect of it being worn down by time and battle. By the way, I was about to name this tutorial Fulgrim in a Fulgrim dark style. But apart from being an extra cheesy dad joke, it would not be correct because this is just not full grimdark in my opinion. I guess that would be as funny as saying I got wrecked painting got wrecked. I don't know what Games Workshop is thinking when they think about these names sometimes. The wing-like armor representing the Emperor's children on his front gets a coat of dark silver. And now we are going to paint the German is coming out. I leave this in. And now we are painting the sword and the wing with bright silver. Since I wanted to define his real wings this time, I quickly drew some lines with Elfic flesh onto the upper part of the flight skin, going down like half the way of the entire wing. The claw or whatever this is here on his tail end gets a mix of dark purple and Hexed Lichen, brighten up with more and more Elfic flesh. For the last steps, we tint the blades with Magus purple and the parts with the open skin tissue with Gory red. Water down to a shade-like consistency, carefully only painting the recesses. And now we are going to paint the faces. Many of these steps will be familiar to you since they are not wildly different to the main armor or main body. We start giving the faces a base coat of dark purple and start painting with Bugmans glow, placing the highlights with a dry brushing motion onto them while the purple underneath is still a bit wet. In this case, we create a smooth transition right from the start. I like to paint from the chin upwards to the forehead, since with this motion the brush somehow leaves out the eye sockets and really defines the most raised parts. You should really give this one a try. You can also paint it upside down if this is easier for you. I don't know what it is, but it somehow looks even more menacing. And I know it feels strange, but it works, so it's not stupid. Painting faces is really important for a mini, and to be honest, Fulgrim's face is really easy because he has such extreme and pronounced features. It's a good way to start painting faces. we are going to paint the most raised areas of his face with light flesh. Like the cheeks and the cheekbones, and since most of it is actually pretty pronounced, it really is easy to make them stand out. Painting his teeth with Elfic flesh and giving the eyes a white dot. If you like it like this, you can leave it here, otherwise you could paint a glow effect around them using a watered down Gory red. For the helmet, we once again start with cold grey and repeat the verdigris effect after we painted the golden trim. We are carefully highlighting the parts over his eyes and nose with wolf grey and a bit of white in there for the most raised areas. For the eye lenses of the helmet and the eyes of Fulgrim's face itself, I chose Gory red and painted a bit over onto his cheek armor to have a slight glow effect. When the base coat is dry, I mix a bit of white in there to create this deep and rich looking pinkish tone, covering only the highest parts of his eyes. And with this final step, I am going to say thank you for watching. Remember to leave a like as this really helps out, and we are going to see each other in the next one.